Let's go. Hello, my name is Bryce Tubbs. With me today is Carl Pate, who is helping to grow and create entrepreneurs. He's a personal productivity expert, speaker, author, business coach, and mentor, as well as the co-founder and director at Undercover Entrepreneur Limited. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Carl.
Thank you for having me on, Bryce.
You're welcome.
Real pleasure.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And for those watching, before we go any further, if you're watching this from any location that is outside of our free community, I just want to personally invite you inside. It's taken a tremendous amount of time and energy to create such a positive group of people who want to see each other succeed. So if that's you and that's what you've been missing, go and click on the link either above or below and join us right now inside of the community. Now, Carl, what was life like before you got into coaching and mentorship? Really, what was the catalyst that brought you into the space?
Right, sure. So this is my second career. So I started out in finance. So I was a finance director for 16 years, but I was in finance for about 27 years, nearly 3 decades. And I loved the first 23 years. And then I got to the point where we sold the business. So there's a big story behind that. I can go into that in a second if you like. And then I kind of tolerated 2 years, and then I hated the last 2 years of being there. And that was the thing that brought me into the entrepreneurial space. I've been doing bits in the background in mornings and evenings and weekends, creating software, creating something around the personal development world. And then at that point, back in 2016, I decided to get out and go and do my own thing. And so and I've never looked back from them. Nice. But the big story was inside of the clothing business inside of my finance career. So I traveled the world for about 2 years, just all over the place, about 25 different countries, spending reasonable amounts of time there. It's where I met my wife on my last trip to America. But what happened was that back in 2000, we got involved in a management buyout. So the business that we were working for was on its knees. So it had lost £165 million in the 5 years before we bought it, so over $200 million. It had lost £65 million, about $100 million, in the year that we bought it. So it was completely on its knees. We bought it for £1. We turned it around in 3 years and made it profitable. And then 12 years after the original purchase, we sold it for tens of millions. So that's the big story. We took something that we saw an opportunity in the business that we're working in, and we turned it into a business that we could actually be proud of, and that we ended up selling. That business is now, it's been broken up since we sold it. Mm-hmm. It's not the business, certainly not the business that it was, but that was where I got all of my sort of experience, and it was a fantastic time. That first 23 years, the 4 years where I was tolerating and hated it, well, after we'd sold it, I stayed on for 4 years after we sold the business, and it was 4 years longer than I should have done, really. Mm-hmm. But it was, you get caught in, and this is one of the big things that we talk about now for entrepreneurs. You get caught in this. Like the frog in boiling water. You put him in boiling water and he'll jump out. You put him in cold water and gradually heat it up, and he'll boil to death. And that's what I was doing, and that's what a lot of people do. There's only, according to statistics of a Murray poll from a few years ago, only about 13% of people really enjoy what they do. Mm-hmm. And that's a staggering number. About 64% just going through the motions, and about 20% are actually hating it. And I sat in all those camps, and the worst place to be is in the middle zone, that 64% of just going through the motions, because you've not got enough energy, you've not got enough emotion inside of you to do something about it. When you hate it, you'll do something. Mm. When you love it, that's great. But when you're just going through the motions, it just, you're just going through the motions, and you don't actually feel enough desire to change things. Mm.
So let me ask you this question. So then someone in that middle 64%, do they have to hit like a rock bottom? Can they, is there like generally what like the narrative starts is they're content, something negative happens and they leave. Can it be something positive that happens that actually shifts them out, or what?
Yeah, of course. I think I tend to find that people get pushed into action by pain, and then they continue it through pleasure. But of course you can, if you get into the right environment, if you get in with the right group of people, then of course the positive energy from those people that you mix with can bring you up so that you get to the point of realizing actually there's much more to life than just going through the motions of the job that you're in, and you can get out and do it, which is what people in your group, I'm guessing, will be feeling. If they've got this positive energy that's coming out of that, then you can change all sorts of things with that, because you start to see other people doing it. And that is the biggest thing. People are the biggest thing and the biggest catalyst to change that will help you to move in the right direction, without any question.
Is that because you start becoming more like the people around you?
Absolutely. You can't help but, because all of if you're surrounded by people who are always negative, and you just get into that crowd and into that mindset, your actions will follow your thoughts. It's just what's going to happen, and your results will follow your actions. But if you're with people who are pulling you up, and people who are inspiring you, and people who are showing you that there's a different way, then you can't help but get engaged in that community as well, and in that lifestyle as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for those watching, that's really why you go and join the community, because it, just like you're saying, you start changing who you're around, then your thoughts start changing. Then you start getting more than what you've ever done. You start getting that passion, that pleasure again. So if that's you, click on the link either above or below and join us now. Now, let me ask you this question. So one thing that we hear like in the coaching space is generally like when it comes to making more money, they'll say something along the lines of, if you haven't made it past a certain amount, then there's something in your belief system that's stopping you from making that amount. Now, if you start adding more skills, can you break that kind of wall, or is it only in the beliefs that cause you to make, do more and earn more?
I think this is a really interesting question. And partly because of what we're doing now in Undercover Entrepreneur, we talk about EQ and IQ. I think from an IQ point of view, which is me, I'm very much the IQ side of things. I'm systems, consistency, business, that's me. And yes, so building your skills can, without question, help you to grow and do more things, because you've got more confidence. You've got more confidence, more competence. There's other stuff that you can do. But the real trick to this is in the EQ side. It's in the emotional side. So it's in the mindset. You get the mindset right. You start to change things. You start to change the way that you see things, the way that you actually approach life. Then you can mix those two things. And it's really, really interesting, because I'm very IQ. So that's what my book's all about. I wrote my book, and that's all very IQ stuff, but and all about consistency. The EQ stuff, which is what Paul is all about, my business partner and Undercover Entrepreneur, he's all about that. So he's all about the goal setting, the vision, the creativity, the entrepreneurialism. And when you put those two things together, you got a world that just expands dramatically. Wow. But without the two things, I mean, like in some ways, and in some conversations that we have together, they look like we're completely opposite ends of the spectrum. But as you get into the conversation, you get closer and closer and closer and closer, and you realize you're always two sides of the same coin. The conversation around the EQ and the IQ, it's a fascinating one, but it's one that really needs to be explored.
Let me ask you this weird question then, right? So since there's two of you, right? Now, for most watching, they might not have a co-founder. If you could choose when you're first starting out, the IQ or the EQ, which side do you think is more important if you're a new entrepreneur just getting off the ground?
Oh, that's a very unfair question.
I'm sorry. I know it's weird.
I always say IQ.
I'm with you.
I think the key here, Bryce, is that even if you start out on your own, you're not on your own. If you go out and you're the single person, you haven't got a business partner, you can always find someone else like yourself. You can find a community, you can find a mentor, you can find a coach, you can find someone that will help you to see the other side of the coin. someone who can see, you know, they say you can't see the picture from inside the frame. You need someone from the outside to look. Now, when you're a business partner and you both sort of like, you know, we're opposites, but we have some very similar values, then you can do that for each other. If you're just an individual, then go out and find someone who can see that for you. Find someone, if you're very IQ, then find someone who is very EQ to help you. This is a really interesting thing as well. And now in the clothing business, even, I never realized this was happening at the time, but when I look back at it, there were four business partners, and we were 2 EQ, 2 IQ. So there was myself, and as the finance director, the CFO, and there was the operations director. We were both very IQ. The CEO, the chairman, and the HR director, both very EQ. Mm-hmm. And when you've got that dynamic, it changes the way that you see things. You don't just see things through your own eyes. You have to be careful when you come across this and you start thinking about it, that you don't make yourself wrong all the time. Because, you know, I did that when I started to work with Paul. I started to look too much over to the EQ side and thinking that what I'd done was wrong, but it wasn't, because I got everything that I'd achieved until then came from my side of the equation. But it is important to have that balance, and you can get it from outside of. It doesn't have to be a business partner.
That's a great point. Yeah, because that's one thing that I see. It's like people have trouble. Let me ask you this question. This is probably even more kind of minute. You know, like a lot of people in the audience, they have to start, you know, either doing discovery calls or consultations, somewhere where they are talking to a potential client, and then a transaction is made either on the call or after the call. Do you think that these kind of, for lack of better words, because they don't like using the word sales, so you kind of gotta investment calls or enrollment calls. Do you think it's more of an EQ type of thing, or it's more of an IQ type of thing that you got to start developing
to get someone into? So just so I understand the question. So we're saying when you're talking to a potential client, a prospect,
correct?
Then should you be going at them with the EQ or with the IQ?
Yeah,
is that the question? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. It's a bit like the marketing analogy of the logic sandwich. You know, you have you first hit with emotion, and then so that someone gets a feeling that there's something going on, and then you come in with the IQ, with the, you know, the sort of logic, the reasons why it should happen. But then in order to get them across the line, you then need to go back to the emotion again, because that's when you get them fired up and moving forward. And it's a really interesting sort of metaphor to go with. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it does also depend upon who the other person is on the other side. Yeah. You know, when we go out there and we find someone who is very IQ, and this is the benefit of having the both of us working together. When we find someone who's very IQ, I can relate to them, but Paul can open their eyes to something else. And when they're very EQ, Paul can relate to them, but I can open their eyes to something else. And that's a real powerful thing. But I think, you know, just going out and talking to people and finding out what's going on for them. And that's at the end of the day, that's all that matters. You know, who are they? What are they doing? What do they want? What's the thing that they're looking to you to solve for them? And how do you do that for them? And I think if you start trying to analyze whether you're going at EQ or whether you're going at IQ, then it won't work. You kind of have to get that feel for where they are and what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's just about going through being aware, being aware of the concept, and then going away thinking about it, and then you can bring that thing into the conversation. You don't force it in. You just know that it's there then, and the conversation can actually go where it needs to go.
You know, let me ask you this question, just kind of shifting a little bit. You know, for someone who is either new in the entrepreneur space, maybe they're a solopreneur. I had a conversation with a person. They were like, expenses. I have to keep my expenses as low as possible right now in the beginning, and then their, you know, sales don't really follow because they don't have either any marketing expense, or they don't have any, like, they won't even pay for LinkedIn Premium because it's, you know, $80 a month. You know, maybe since you've been on both ends of the spectrum, the startup phase and the large phase, when you're like starting up, do you agree with? I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. Do you agree with with raising your expenses to a certain point so you can start getting the sales going, or do you advise going grassroots as much as possible at first?
I mean, again, it's difficult to say as in a generality. You know, if someone's got no money at all, then you're going to be, and when you're very first starting out, you're going to be doing more roles than you will be doing in a year's time or 2 years' time or whatever. So there is going to be some of that. I think one mistake that lots of entrepreneurs make is that they don't engage with outsourcing or bringing other people into the business soon enough, because they think it's too expensive. And it is kind of too expensive because you can do that stuff yourself, a lot of the stuff. And so it is expensive when you just look at it as a cost. But when you look at it as what you can actually do with that time, then things start to change. But you have to do something with that time that you free up when you bring someone else in, whether it be another person into your team or whether it be an outsourcer. And I think this is the challenge that most people have, is that when they are looking to bring those costs in, they just can't see what else they could be doing because they've not been doing it, because they've been too busy doing that other stuff. And at some stage, and I'm not suggesting this is on day one, but at some stage, you've got to go and say, right, okay, I have faith. I believe that this is going to work. Now we've got to commit. We've got to commit, and we've got to burn the bridges. And this is what I did with my old business. You know, I came out of there and I didn't realize that I needed to burn the bridges. In fact, I did something really weird, which was to keep LinkedIn for my accounting stuff, and everything else I was going down some other road, thinking that no one would link the two. But of course they were. But worse than that, I got a foot on the brake because I was looking back at this and saying, I've got a route back there if I need to.
Yeah.
Wrong. You've got to burn your bridges and move forwards. When you burn your bridges and move forwards, when you've only got that way to go, then you'll just keep going that way, and you'll make it work. You'll find what you need to do. But getting other people into your business sooner than you think is critical, because you can't do everything. If you want to build an empire, if you just want a nice lifestyle business, it's just you and you've got nobody else to worry about, then yeah, carry on. But you know, you're going to be doing a lot of admin, you're going to be doing a lot of things that you don't really want to do. If you want to build an empire, if you want to actually grow your business, you've got to have other people involved. And the sooner that you can get them involved, the better. But you do need to be cost conscious, don't you? Of course. But you know, if you're too cost conscious, you won't grow the sales. Just naturally, you won't be able to, because you won't have the skill base, you won't have the energy, you won't have the time, you won't have everything that you need for you to expand. When you're tying yourself into a knot where you're just saying, oh, now I've got to be really careful, I've got to be really careful, I've got to be really careful, you know, you end up not doing anything.
Yeah. I even noticed when you're saying being really careful, your kind of body language close up and contract. That's interesting.
Yeah, and you
goes back,
away from it and open it up. You have to.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that, you know, confidence kind of come once you start making your sales. And what is that like for a lot of people? They ask, you know, at what time did you start relaxing and being okay with you know, spending? For me, since I had like other businesses in the past, it was from the start. But at what stage for someone new do they start getting that confidence?
Getting a couple of sales in will always help, of course, because then you start to believe in it. But you have to have faith. I went on a mastermind program with Les Brown in Jamaica a couple of years ago. And that was a question that I asked him, because I was just starting this business at the time, just probably about a year or so in. And I said, look, I'm forever sowing seeds. You know, it feels like I'm sowing seeds all the time and nothing's coming through. And I don't know whether I'm sowing the right seeds or what I'm doing. Well, there's a story that Les Brown talks about the Chinese bamboo tree, where you're watering it every day, and then but nothing's happening. And after 5 years, all of a sudden this thing grows like crazy. But you've got to be putting all that stuff in. And the thing that he said to me that's really stuck with me is he just said, you've got to have faith. Got to have faith. Now, having faith when you're just doing something yourself is very tricky. Comes back, and I don't know why this keeps coming back. Well, I do actually, because it's very important. It keeps coming back to this idea of coaches and mentors. When you've got a coach and a mentor who can help you to see what you're doing, so that when you know that the stuff that you're doing someone's checking in on as well. So you're not running east chasing the sunset. You know, you are actually getting focused on the right things, and someone's helping you to see that you're going in the right direction. Then yeah, you're going to be sowing seeds for a while, but you know that you're doing the right thing. And getting those small things. This is a big-ish thing that I talk about in my book, is sowing small seeds. It's the aggregation of marginal gains. You do something very small, and then you make sure you embed that into your life, and then you build something else and something else and something else and something else, and all of a sudden these things start to grow exponentially, and you as a person starts to grow exponentially.
Yeah. Well, since you touched on it, can we talk a little bit about your book and what that looks like, and what the process was for it?
Of course. So I'll just wave at you first. There you
go. Nice.
Making shit happen. Yes. So where it came from was, as I mentioned before, I studied for, 20, 30 years. I was always obsessed with time, and I got obsessed with personal development, and all of the time, whenever I was studying it, it all kept coming back to productivity. And so when I came out of the clothing business and got into doing my own stuff, I decided, I got notes upon notes in this. I'm just pointing up here because this is where the cupboard where I keep the notes. But I got all sorts of notes, and I decided to bring them into the book. And so I created the structure, which I called the 5 Pillars of Awesome, which is all based around the acronym HABIT. So there's 5 elements to it, and it all comes back to personal productivity: habit, alignment, balance, integration, and tracking. And all of that is all about how you actually build something yourself. First 3 pillars are all personal and all about the foundation. Then you get the strategies, and then you get how do you actually keep it. And so that's the principle. And yeah, it was an interesting process going through writing the book and putting it out there. And I love it now. And actually, a really interesting thing is I listen to it and or read it every day.
Oh.
Myself.
Wow.
And that might sound a little bit weird and a bit conceited, but it's not about that. What it's about is making sure that I'm using it, because there's so many tips and tricks and strategies. It's easy to get complacent around things and let them drop. And so for me, what I've got to do whilst I'm in this space is make sure that everything I'm talking about, I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I'm actually in the middle of it. So I'm constantly reminding myself of these things. This is what I need to be doing. This is what needs to be happening. So but it was a really interesting process to go through, and I published it on my 50th birthday.
Oh wow, that's cool. Wow. Let me ask you this question. So there's 2 places I was going to go with. First, where people go to learn more about you, and where can they go maybe to pick up the book?
Okay, well, book's on Amazon. Making Shit Happen, Carl Pate. And you can find me, I've got my details inside the book, but, Carl@productivitypowerhouse.com or Carl@undercover-entrepreneur.com. So both of those email addresses can get to me. And yeah, I'm always looking to find people who are passionate about making the most out of their lives, because the worst thing that you can do is get to the back end of your life and regret that you didn't do something, particularly if you get to that point and you didn't get to do it because you thought you'd not got enough time, because you do. We've all got the same amount of time. It's just about how you use it. And that's what the book's all about. It's what I'm all about. I've created software as well, daily life tracker software, which is what that's all about as well. Life management software to make sure that you build the right habits into your life so that you've got everything working for you.
Wow. That sounds really cool. And for those watching, go check out his tracker, go check out his book, go check him out. And for those watching, we thoroughly hope that you found some value out of that. Go back and rewatch that if you're coming away from it, you didn't really learn too much, because there's a lot of little stuff inside there that if you just absorb at least one concept, it'll probably take your business and to the next level and help you reach your goals a little bit faster. And that's kind of the reason why we even have this community and even do this podcast, because you need to get around people that are maybe a little bit farther ahead of you or on a similar journey to you, because they know what you're going through. He's been there before, and he can help you kind of get to where your goals are. So that's what you've kind of been lacking in these times that we're in. Come and join us by clicking the link either above or below this video. Join us right now. We'd love to have you inside the community. Now, hopefully you enjoyed watching as much as we enjoyed creating it. Feel free to hit the share button so other people can get some great value as well. We're done recording in 3 and 2 and 1 and done. Excellent.